Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Nefesh podcast. This is episode 29, part 2, and this is the second part of our podcast from last week, hearing from Don and Lisa Spencer and their experience surviving the devastating wildfire in Paradise, California in 2018 called the Camp Fire. And as we heard last week, their home was completely destroyed, their possessions gone, but they, their boys, their family was safe. And so we're going to pick up in the aftermath of all of that, the days following, and how that impacted their lives and how their faith in God, how their relationships are stronger. And I know that this is going to be inspiring, and I am excited that you are joining us again. So listen in.
God was so gracious to us. He just was merciful and took such good care of us through his people. And we had a beautiful home to stay in with friends for several weeks. And that's a whole other long story, but he orchestrated this amazing rental home when there was not a single place to rent. Yeah. I mean, apartment, shack, there was nothing to find. Wow. But here he had saved this home for us to rent. We moved in, I think, about 3 weeks after the fire, and our church community, my mom's community in Rio Vista gathered up all this amazing furniture. My sister's community in Bakersfield. I mean, there were U-Hauls of furniture and packages from Amazon and donations and GoFundMes and from people we'd never met. I mean, it just was this overflowing abundance of what felt to me like love from God.
Right. Through others,
yeah. Just like, I see you, I got you. I'm gonna meet all your needs and more. Abundantly more.
We kept getting care packages, and my brother and his wife had graciously sent up a box. Everything's.
Theirs was the first.
Everything's gone. So within days of us arriving and visiting at our friend's place and staying there for the 5 weeks,
about 3 weeks,
a box shows up, and it has gifts, board games.
Wow.
Just
toothbrushes.
Wow.
Just they went to the store and just like anything on any
Yeah.
shelf could work in this situation, right?
Yeah.
Everything. And so then another one that's my brother though, right? He's going to step up, of course. He's Brian and he's and Brenda, and they're going to take care of us. I know. I mean, no doubt. But then we got a Christmas package from a family through some random church that heard about us and they were like on the East Coast or Midwest, Mid-East or
Kentucky or something.
Yeah, and they so we ended up with a box full of wrong sizes of clothes.
Sure.
But Bibles and clothes and just blessings on cards and just we love you and we're praying for you and just this happened over and over again and people stopping by the shop and donating, giving us $500 gift cards and just over and over and over again. And then what was cool though was not just what was given to us, but the community in this time of raw openness and hurting. Everybody in this town, down in Chico knows somebody or is housing somebody. Streets are filled with RVs and cars. Wow. I mean, everything is impacted completely. Wow. But what was beautiful was seeing the response and feeling the tenderness and the goodness of God pouring out through people who didn't even know him. And this just care and concern and kindness. And you could tell by the way people drove even that in the 6 months after the fire that people were cautious and kind and letting people in and going slow. Wow. And it just completely changed the face of our area for a long, and it will forever, but during that time it was so tender and so gentle. Wow. Like you're dealing with somebody who's just had a tragic event happen and they're dying or their wife just died or something, and so everybody was treating everybody like that, and it was just,
it's beautiful.
And there would be people in our lobby of our business because we're right at the bottom of the hill, right? We're right there where Paradise, the climb starts. We're right at the bottom, and people were in there. I have pictures of people hugging and crying and talking, and it just went on. I mean, for a year, and we're just watching this. We have a front row seat to this beauty, and
donating cars and money for people's car repairs,
Yep.
and just
and we were, a lot of people were giving things away as businesses, and we were giving away. Hope I don't lose my reward in heaven for this, but we were giving away like cabin filters and air filters for cars because they
Yeah.
were getting stuck
Oh,
because it was
yeah.
ash was over.
Right.
It was dark for a long time,
Wow.
weeks, and so we were giving those away. So people come in, we meet a lot of people we didn't know. And there were a few people where their car, a lot of times cars would survive because they were away from the house, but like all the tail lights in the bumper would be melted and
Wow.
weird stuff would happen. And so we fixed up a few cars like that and were able to just say, it's on us. And
Wow.
and so a lot of people were giving and kind like that during that time. And people that didn't have very much or very much money would be there giving jackets and giving gift cards for $100, and they had nothing.
meals or
Wanted to make sure that we were okay.
Right.
And we were more than okay. We were hurt for sure, but we were so enveloped by arms of love from the Lord and from the church and people who were didn't care about God. Everybody came together. It was
Yeah.
really, really amazing. And so that's the bright side of having a tragedy happen like that, is just seeing the response to it and the kindness of people.
the verse Psalm 23, the whole psalm, but surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. That is when I think about that time, that is what sticks out to me. Is
Yeah.
God, his goodness and his mercy following us. It's like we would wake up early in the morning, not sleeping great just because of all the trauma and things to figure out. I mean, every day was very, very full, trying to figure out what we needed to do. Like, how do we find a house? Okay, now we found a house. How do we get furniture? Okay, now we have furniture. How do we get food? Just all those, if you just look around your house and you think everything needing to be replaced, and then, your systems, like okay, what do our days look like? And how do we, how do we function? So, a lot of trauma, but I just remember waking up early every morning and, falling into bed at night and thinking all day long, God was just providing evidence of his nearness, of his goodness, of his compassion, of his protection. It forever changed us,
When did it hit you? You didn't go up with Dawn on
No.
that weekend. When did it hit you what had happened?
I'm not sure that there's like a specific point. I mean, I think honestly, looking
Wasn't it
back,
kind of gradual?
yeah, I think it's gradual. I think you're the way God has designed our bodies. I think you're kind of in that like cocoon of shock for a while, and it's, I think it's that a bit of self-preservation that he built into us. Like your brain and body can only absorb so much, and so. Even I'd say a month later when we got to go up and see the house, yes, there were some tears. It was a bit emotional, but it was more surreal than
Almost like it was
traumatic.
separate from you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just remember like driving down the driveway, standing in front of the house with the boys and thinking, it's so flat.
Wow.
How? Because it was a split level, so it's technically 3 stories.
Sure.
Level to, I don't know, a couple feet of debris.
Wow.
And I kept thinking, how is that possible? How do 3 stories of, 6 people's belongings become leveled to that little? Just very surreal. So I think it was a gradual. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Were you able to find? Did you sift through the rubble at all? Were you able?
Yeah, the
to
Billy
find-
Graham Association sent a bunch of volunteers up to help people, and
Did
so
they
they would send people, and they would just come with their little sifter screens and pray with you and give you a Bible to each family, and so they were there with us to, we didn't need help sifting, and there was hardly anything left, but they were just there to make sure you're okay and to pray for you and to put a name to a face.
Just an opportunity to extend the love of
yeah.
Christ.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it was neat.
But before that happened, the first day that we were allowed back in paradise, officially, legally, and I think it was just the 3 younger boys and Dawn and I that went up, they did ask, we didn't want them to really get into the ashes because, there were reports of how toxic everything was, and, you weren't supposed to drink the water for a long time in Paradise after they were providing water for people. So we didn't really want them to sift through too much, but, they were kind of poking around on the edges. And the funniest thing, we were, when we got married, I won't say forced, but we were strongly encouraged by my mother to register for china and silver. And I remember thinking, I don't want china. I just want sheets and towels and regular dishes. But it was very important to her because all of her friends wanted to buy us china and silver. So in rebellion, I registered for the cheapest, ugliest china. I did. I was like, which one's the cheapest? And the lady at the store said this one. I said, I'll take it. So I hated that china, and we barely used it. Dawn would sometimes try to get it out, and it just was like, no. Well, guess what survived?
No!
The boys are poking around, and they go, hey, Mom, look, your china. And they lift up piece after piece that's maybe a little bit charred, but perfectly intact.
That is funny.
And I didn't end up keeping it. Well, let's just pretend like that didn't happen. Push it under the ash, it'll be fine. But that was one of those kind of comical moments. So, oh boy.
There was a moment that you've shared before when, I don't remember what precipitated it, but I think it may have been when you were still staying with your friends those first few weeks, when you went out to your car.
Yeah.
What was that?
That was the morning that we learned. I don't remember if it was the day after the fire or the next day, but where we heard on the news that those people had passed away just a couple blocks up from our house. And I think, just grieving for them and their families and all of those who, there were many who were missing for a long time, and some ended up being found and some, had passed. But just, I think the gravity of the situation definitely hit me that morning. And also just realizing how close we had come, to possibly dying, and so many things mixed in once. It's just, I think that's another thing that I have a new understanding of, is how you can hold so many things at once. Grief and gratitude. It's like, how can they both be so strong at the same time? But that's what that moment was for me. And I remember we were all in our friend's house watching the news, and I said to Dawn, I need to have a good cry. And I'm going out to my car. Don't follow me.
But he did, right?
Yes, he's such a stinker. And I said, oh, honey, please, can I come with you? I said, no. I need to cry by myself. I need to, let it out. And he did. I didn't know this till partway through my good cry, but I went in my car and, of course, shut the doors, and he was just kind of walking a perimeter around, just, concerned about me. But, yeah, that was one of those, guttural wailing, just intense grief. So, it's crazy that you can, years later still feel those same feelings. So,
So when you were staying with this family, and I know, Dawn, you were hard at work trying to find a place, and that was a miracle to get that rental place. The aftermath of the fire, and it's been a long one. I in previous conversations, I feel like almost like a year after all of the stuff that you were dealing with and the difficulties that you both were experiencing. Take us back a little bit through that, through what that was like, trying to get things back in order, and just the processes, and where you were both trying to process through it.
Well, the bottom line was that, we got a lot of stuff donated to us. We moved into that rental, and then truckloads of stuff, being brought to us, and so much that we had to slough some off to other people and, pass on the blessings. And then, of course, with the advent of online ordering, we must have filled up this huge backyard of this house so many times with boxes and had to make dump runs. And
Wow.
I mean, it's so much stuff because you're buying,
Everything.
Yeah.
you're buying everything. And so rebuilding, I mean, it was probably, I think we bought the house that we're living in now in Chico in September, and the fire was November. So that whole time we're in, living at a friend's place for roughly a month, and then the rest of that time we're in a rental that was a blessing in kind, but didn't have the parking that we needed for 6 people to live there. It was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it was just a constant daily focus on, we have to still run our business.
Right.
And I still have to, I went to work on Tuesday morning after the fire.
Did you really?
Yeah, because we had just hired a new guy to run the front, and he was still in training, and I couldn't just, there was 4 employees there that had to be,
Wow.
had to be managed and supported. And so we had to go back on Tuesday morning and answer the phone. Spencer Automotive, this is Don. How can I help you? And they want their oil change appointment or their cabin filter replaced or whatever. And it was really, it was cumbersome to focus on those little seemingly meaningless things. But that's service. That's, and that's part of how we get our money too, right? So we're forced to
Wow.
focus on that. And then the rebuilding process, man, it's still going on. I mean, there's still stuff that we find ourselves, we don't remember that we lost it, or maybe we got one since the fire, but we can't remember. I think one time I'd kept buying, I'd go through Home Depot getting stuff, and then I'd run through the tool section every time and just grab something. And I grabbed a pipe wrench, and I'm like, I know, everybody needs a pipe wrench. And so I grabbed one, just threw it into the pile, and I would just do that. I'd grab 1 or 2 things every time I went through there and just kept adding it to my little toolbox that I bought. And then I found, you just don't remember what you bought. There's so much buying going on.
Well,
and so I
and
ended up with 3 of those pipe wrenches.
Let's explain that for you, tools, it's not like a little toolbox
Right,
that you
no,
had.
no.
I mean, you may be going here, but you had a whole...
A lifetime.
a lifetime. You a mechanic, but so much more. I mean, you've got everything. In the garage?
In our garage at our house in Paradise, we had, I could have been a tile contractor. I could have been a sheetrock contractor. I could have been I had winches and tree climbing equipment and 4 chainsaws and, fishing stuff. And I could have been a mechanic 3 more times with the toolbox. My first toolbox I had when I was a kid in high school was in there filled with tools, and 2 more toolboxes filled. And so all throughout the garage was, woodworking lathes and bandsaws and equipment. So I could have been like a general contractor, and worked in so many different areas out of that stuff. So yeah, when you lose, it wasn't like I had a little handheld or even a top and bottom chest. It was like my garage literally had a skinny little path that you could work through around through this 2-car garage, just stuffed with shelves and full of everything. And so yeah, being a tool guy and being a fixer and a doer and having grown up doing it all myself, to have stuff that your grandfather had touched and used, and to have that stuff passed down through generations, and to feel that connection with your history every time you grab that tool, to have that stuff gone was I remember there was one tool that I did grab. I looked specifically for it when I went in there. There was my grandfather back in the 30s and 40s in East Texas had a blacksmith shop and also an auto repair kind of a thing back then. And so he had taken a leaf spring from a car and forged it into a huge pry bar with one of those kind of nail puller heads with the big U on the end. It looked like a shepherd's hook, but a small version of that. And I went and found that hanging on the side of my toolbox, and it had, the toolbox was there, and it had kind of all sagged and looked all sad, but that deal was on the side. So that was one thing I was sure to grab.
Survived?
That survived.
Okay.
And I grabbed it and still use it to this day. So yeah.
And we're talking about, thousands of dollars of equipment, right?
Probably hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment that's separate from the home that was in that garage.
Yeah, and the insurance company is going, it's good news. We'll pay up to $22,000 for the contents of your 2-car garage.
Thank you.
And I go, that's not good news.
Yeah.
That's not going to work for me. So
But you had, what was that? You had filmed or taken pictures?
during one of the previous scares, I
Yeah.
had gone through and opened every single drawer of every toolbox and focused and taken videos of everything. And so I started itemizing that garage, and I think I was probably 8 or 10 hours into itemizing it, making a list and looking up comps and going, how old is it and what's the replacement cost, and making an Excel sheet
Wow.
for them because they told me I had to itemize it.
Yeah.
So I was 8 or 10 hours into that when they neglected to tell me I didn't need to keep doing that because they had just totaled out. They realized that it was going to go way above our policy limits, so they ended up maxing out our policy and said you didn't need to actually do that. And I was like,
We'll
you
just
gotta
give
be
you your
kidding
full
me.
policy amount. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that was hard to hear, but because time at that moment was so precious because
Yeah.
we were, every waking minute was focused on rebuilding.
Yeah.
You were asking what it was like. I mean, we're still dealing with we still own the property that has hundreds of dead trees,
Do you really?
and we're still
we're
trying to
trying.
sell it. And we've been scammed by 2 separate people trying to purchase it.
Are you serious?
That are trying to just take advantage. There's all kinds of wolves out there, and so we've had this property basically in escrow twice, and people trying to take advantage.
You still
insane.
own it.
We still own it,
We don't want to.
No.
and we got the
It's a
city
giant
wants
liability.
fire safe measures taken on it, and it's crazy money to get
Yeah.
stuff taken care of on a piece of property like that.
Wow.
And so
But it's worth not much because what is the estimates for the trees to be? The dead trees
we've had $200,000 to $400,000 estimates.
Oh my gosh.
To come through and get all the trees taken out and
To
properly
create a
cleaned up.
bigger fire perimeter, essentially.
Just to take all
Just-
the dead trees out,
just
because
the trees that died from the fire.
it's
Wow.
5 acres of steep canyon property with trees as 3-4 foot diameter in some cases,
Wow.
big oak trees that are 100 feet tall.
Wow.
And so you take hundreds of that, and you go, how much money does it take to cut down one tree? And so depending on who does the work, the estimates will vary, but so the land's not even worth.
It's worth a negative $200,000. But people from, I think this last guy was from out of town, and he had dreams of, putting condos on it, which wasn't even allowed by the city, but he was
Oh.
determined. So anyway, it did not.
It was a joke,
It's unfortunate. We'll sell it eventually.
Yeah, eventually somebody will buy it for cheap. We just need to get out from underneath it, but we
Yeah.
didn't want to be the ones having to pony up for all
Sure.
of the fire safe measures. We're trying to negotiate all that. So anyways, it's still, the bottom line is it'll
Still
never go
dealing
away.
with the aftermath of that. Well, and in this, and you both know this, I'm sure, and you've already kind of mentioned it. In those traumatic situations, our brain really does go on autopilot, and when you have to actually think about things constantly, your brain can't handle it. It just gets overwhelmed. There's so many things that we do out of habit, right? The routines. Right. We get up and we know where our watches are, our phone, and
our toothbrush.
Yeah. And with
all
everything,
of that completely reinvented.
Your brain is working overtime. So how did you manage?
Well, I was just thinking when you were saying that, I remember a couple days after the fire, so we stayed with my friend Natalie, her husband Josh, and their kids, and they have an in-law unit. It's a shared property, and then Bruce and Linnell and Bruce are also our friends, and Natalie's parents lived on the same property. So everybody was kind of helping in different ways, but Linnell would wake up each morning and she would be my brain. And she would say, today we're going to go into Chico and we're going to buy you some groceries and we're going to go to this donation center and you're going to pick out some sheets and blankets and we're going to go to the bank, and and I'd say, okay, here's some food, go get dressed and then get in the car. And I remember her taking me to the grocery store and her saying, okay, what do you guys like to eat for breakfast? And Sandy Jo, I could not remember. Wow. I don't know what we eat for breakfast. She said, do you eat cereal? Maybe. Do you eat oatmeal? I don't think so. How about eggs? Okay, we'll eat eggs. I don't know what we eat for breakfast. I don't know what I like. I don't know. I just could not make my brain. So she said, that's okay. We're just going to buy these things. And then I also remember going to a donation center at a church, and, there were 6 people living in our home. And I would get a bag and start going through the line, and I would, get like one blanket, and she'd say, "Honey, you've got 6 people who live in your house." "Oh, I don't want to take I need to save some for other people." "Well, you need more than one blanket." "Okay, I'll take 2." And then, sheets and towels and toiletries and all that stuff, and I would take 1 or 2 things, and finally she just got in line behind me with her own bag. she was like,
she would take the extra.
She would take the things that I needed. it's just the strangest thing.
Wow.
I mean,
But how cool to have a friend who
oh
was
yeah, she was my brain.
just
She was my brain.
thinking
Yep.
for you in those few
And
first few days.
there was a lot of shock, but there were some really sweet times with those 2 families. I mean, they became like family to
Yeah.
us. Just, praying together and eating together and crying together, and they were beyond generous with us, just beyond generous, and it was like the best place we could have landed. It was never our plan, but imagine a family taking in 6 people, including one senior with Parkinson's and 2 dogs.
Yeah.
Just boom,
Yeah.
no problem.
Right.
Come on in, and
for-
absorbing us
for weeks
Yeah.
and helping you,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just taking you in, but helping
Yeah.
you each day.
Their days were consumed with us.
Yeah.
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 Watching the news with us, crying with us, doing, just
helping us.
commiserating and encouraging and
Getting medications for Dawn's father, and I just don't even helping the boys find clothes.
How was it with the 2 of you and that time? How you both process things differently.
This is true.
That's an understatement, I know. What was that like for the 2 of you together, and then separately as you're trying to figure all this stuff out?
I think in the beginning when we were in shock and a lot of decisions had to be made, I think we did pretty well relationship-wise and communication-wise. Our rental had a hot tub.
Nice.
And I remember most nights sitting in the hot tub
Yeah.
and just talking about all the things,
Yeah.
like, and dreaming too. Like we own very little here now, and
Yeah.
we are being paid by insurance. We could completely reinvent ourselves and
Sure.
move out of state, or
Sure.
sell the business or whatever. But I think after that kind of initial time wore off and that shock wore off, I think we definitely had some struggles. It was a really hard time.
Yeah, so what happened was I decided to escape. I had the pressures of business and the pressures of, I didn't want to be at my job. I didn't want my business anymore. I wanted to trash the whole thing and walk away and leave, even if I had to give it away. In fact, I drove around to there's other shop owners I knew trying to give my business to them, and I was done. I was completely
Checked out?
100% checked out of that, but I still had to forced, because of circumstance, to go in and go through your daily routine and pretend to care about details that you could care less about for other people. And so it was extremely mentally trying for me to go through that. And then to come home and, everybody there, it was all, there was lots of needs there. There was lots of needs with our home situation, lots of needs with buying forks and buying, hand towels and sorting through a lot of stuff that was donated. And it was just, it was a mess. It was an absolute overwhelming mess. And so, instead of me sitting down and saying, "Hun, how can I serve you?" my answer was to go get in my boat. And it'd be midnight, and I'd leave. I'd go launch my boat. Wind, rain, sunny, it didn't matter. And I'm gone. I gotta leave, and I'm gone till night the next evening, and it just it was a salve to me, and a lot of good time with the Lord on the water, just getting my feet underneath me again.
Yeah.
And but that meant that the cost of that was that that heart, and I'm like that. I'm just pursue something 110%, hyper focus on something. I'm basically, like a high functioning autistic, and in a lot of ways.
Or ADHD,
yeah,
maybe.
but there there's
He doesn't
some,
do anything part way.
No.
Unless it's maintaining my marriage, right? And so,
Yeah.
there was a lot of struggle in that area of her needing me, and even when I was there, just, it's like when we're driving down the hill and you're so focused on stuff
Yeah.
you can't pay attention to time because your brain is filled up with these other things, and my answer was to just focus on myself and what I wanted and what I needed during that time. And so we were both going and seeing Christian counselors individually at that time, and we were thinking about going into a marriage counseling situation, but we ended up just staying in the individual counseling, working on ourselves and working through it. And it took a couple of years, I would say, solid couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And here we are. It's about, we're coming up on, has it been 5 years now? I think the fire was 18.
It'll be 5 years this November.
Oh, so it's
We just
been a
passed
little over 4
4
years.
Before.
Yeah.
And it was a couple really hard, year and a half to 2 years of really, really hard, and it's getting better. And we're also going through at the same time the change of all of this other stuff. Plus our kids we're turning into empty nesters. Our kids are growing up, and that's a really hard thing for her, I think, to let go of. This whole several decades has been focused on raising these children, and now they don't need us anymore, and they're all in college or above. And so we're going through these major life changes and having to reinvent like what our relationship is about. Is it centered on God? Is it centered on each other? And are we putting ourselves last? And it's something I haven't done well with, and we're working on it and doing better for sure.
Well, what is so cool though is the story, you going out to the car and you're out there with her.
Yeah.
That's who you are,
Yeah.
Dawn, and the other stuff was a strain on you, but that really is who you are. You really do care about people, and you care about people and you show them by what you do, how you can help them. And at that moment, you were just both so
Depleted.
And prior to that, you've shared before that the work on that house in Paradise was all consuming.
Yeah. Overwhelming.
And
we had our own business that was consuming. That was your normal small business owner lifestyle. You're spending your minimum of 40 hours, more like 50 or 60 hours a week on your business, and then I think I was averaging somewhere between 20 and 30 hours a week on the house.
Yeah.
Of between clearing the land and painting the house.
Just needed so much
work.
work.
We added another bathroom in the basement. Basement bathrooms are crazy to do because they're underneath the sewer line, and so there was so much stuff being done all the time, trying to figure out the wood storage and the firewood and the protecting the deck, and it just, we were 4.5 years of just straight hardcore, intense work on the place, and it was that big. It was a huge house and huge. That deck was, like I said, 2,500 square feet and over 30 feet off the ground in certain parts, and so in six different levels, staircases. It was designed when it was built in the 80s or 90s to be this house to entertain and probably do weddings and parties at. It was this huge, dance floor on the deck that they had to cut off because it was rotten. So there was so much to do, and so you had to become a timber specialist and a house, house specialist in every single discipline, and the plumbing, the electrical. Every plug was worn out in that house. You'd plug something in and it would just fall right out of the plug. Everything was worn out, and so it was like that Fixer Upper movie with was it Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
Money
The Money
Pit.
Pit. Yeah, maybe not that bad, but pretty close sometimes.
It was,
But we had,
it was bad.
I don't know the timeline of when, but we had talked and had agreed that we needed to make an exit plan to get out of that house. We loved it there. It was beautiful, and it was perfect for our kids' age, and it was like a retreat. It was like living at a retreat.
Wow.
But it was killing him.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember what the timeline was to you, babe, where we talked about, okay, we've got to make a plan in the future where in 5 years, we're not going to live here anymore because it was going to kill him. So anyway, God's like, I got you. I got an exit plan for you. Just hold tight.
So you're dealing with 4.5 years of stress.
Yeah.
Then an incredibly tragic,
Yeah.
traumatic moment happens, and then you shift into a whole other stress
Right.
and challenge, and there's no wonder why you are completely fried
Yeah.
and checked out.
Yeah.
So broken. Like,
And-
I think they say PTSD and,
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Totally.
you know, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For you, what was that?
Yeah.
What was that time like?
I think just a lot of it's blurry, just
Yeah.
kind of going through the motions. But I do remember, being very concerned for our marriage and trying to have conversations about it and not really getting anywhere. And, that's normal to some
Yeah.
degree, but then it would just go on. And I remember one night, sitting in our bedroom having the same conversations again, and Dawn just saying, like, why are we talking about this again? We're not coming to any conclusions. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. We were starting to, on occasion, he would sleep in the other room or I would sleep in the other room, and I just remember having this, like, moment in my brain where it clicked and I thought, oh my gosh, this is how divorce happens. Nobody just wakes up one day and is like, oh, I'm all done.
Right.
It's this gradual,
Right.
like, not being able to connect, not being able to understand each other,
Yeah.
Just slowly drifting apart. And I got really scared.
Yeah.
And I just remember saying, like, we need counseling.
Mhm.
We need counseling. And if you're not ready, then I'm going to do counseling on my own. And I called the next day and got signed up. And I also just remember literally on my knees, like, waging war. Like, just asking God for healing and, just crying out to him and asking him to restore and fix and heal, and he absolutely has. It wasn't a quick thing or an easy thing. I think counseling was really, really valuable for both of us. Maybe me more than you, but yeah, that was a hard time.
I heard a statistic years ago, and this related to couples who if they lose a child, that 50% of couples whose child passes away, they divorce, and it's because they're grieving the same thing, and they're not always necessarily able to be there for one another
Right.
in the way that each other needs it.
Right.
And, people who know you would say there is no way on earth these two would ever get divorced. Like, you're solid people, the way you love each other, all of that kind of stuff. And yet it shows it shows the reality of how painful it was, and how not understanding, but that it makes sense that you get to such a point where there's so much brokenness and pain, and again, you're not able to really be there for each other in the ways that you need to or understand.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, and that is saying that is how difficult it was.
Yeah.
That it got there, and yet, of course, the testament to both of your character and your relationship with each other and your relationship with the Lord, that you're where
Well,
you are.
there's a willingness to yield that is really hard to come by in ourselves. To the Lord, a willingness to yield to His will over our own,
Yeah.
willingness. And that was hard to come up with, hard to allow the Lord to work through you and for His words to come out of your mouth instead of your own. And it's difficult. It had been that year had been, before the fire, had been an extremely trying and difficult year. I ended the year already having chest pains and stuff because of stress. And so it started with, in the end of 2017, we were forced to move our business because our landlord wanted their property back. And so moving the business is like, for me, it's like a month straight of like between 15 and 20-hour work days.
It's gigantic.
It just, and you don't recover for 6 months. It's hard moving your business. an auto repair business.
Yeah.
And that happened right at the beginning. That's how 18 started.
Wow.
So during that time, my mother, who lives 3.5, 4 hours away from us with my brother and his wife, was dying of cancer. And so I'm driving, moving the business. Now I'm driving down and visiting my mom and trying to get as much time with her before things start getting ugly.
Right.
And so I'm down spending whole weekends and watching her and spending time with her and dealing with that. And I think it was in June of 18 that she passed.
That alone.
Those two things alone could could have put me over the edge.
Absolutely.
Just those two, just the business itself.
Absolutely.
And then my mom on top of that. And then I'm dealing with my father living with us at that time I would walk into the house and I would instantly see red when I saw him. Instantly angry, on edge, didn't want to look at him. And that was extremely stressful to me. On top of that, I'm spending 20 to 30 hours a week trying to repair this property. And I'm having chest pains every time I start to imagine the next 8 things I have to do. We've clearly taken on more than we should have. And in addition to that, my business with the 4 employees that I had, 3 out of 4 of them during that year, either one left or one got replaced by somebody else. So 3 out of 4 of my entire crew, including my front office person who managed everything, got replaced and had to be retrained.
Wow.
So all of this is happening at the same time. Everything's circling in this crazy storm. And then the fire hits, and in so many ways it was hard, extremely hard, but it actually relieved a lot of that.
Yeah.
It took away that 20 to 30 hours of stress I had, to work on the house. So a lot of there was no more way to control it anymore. And so that year, for us to be struggling in our marriage because of any one of those things that happened that year.
Absolutely.
And then to have the fire on top of that. I mean, I was just at my breaking point.
Absolutely.
And it was a struggle to just get out of bed and figure out what the first priority was for the day with that many things happening. So my mind couldn't do anything else but want to escape.
How
It's
long?
not justified. I mean,
No. In fact, I would disagree. Well, I mean, it's understandable, and
right, I hear what you're saying.
I mean, it just makes complete sense. You just go into a place where you just,
There's a lot of weight, and you're trying to get out from underneath it. At some point, your mind and your body and your hope can only stand so many things at once. So I appreciate you, Lisa, being so patient with me during that time and working through it, not just walking.
Patient.
How for
By patient,
you?
I mean controlling.
Stop it.
Well, and so fishing for you has become, a huge thing, and but a way for you to retreat and re-energize and find, you both have your ways of and probably now understand even better what it is that you need individually to kind of recharge and refresh.
I found that if I focus on fishing, I don't have to focus on my marriage or my business or anything else that matters.
So have you guys set some parameters in place? He can go out fishing if he comes back, or no? You just let him.
No,
for her to
we
try
don't
and
have that kind of marriage.
She tried. That was part of the struggle. Was there was no focus from me on her and on the marriage and the kids and stuff, and there was an attempt to control that on a lot of levels from her side of things, and that was even more pressure.
Sure.
And I just saw it as another weight. I needed this in my mind. I thought I did, and so in hindsight, I wish I would have handled it completely different.
Sure.
But what changed in our marriage, and this has happened in several things in our life. When I'm stuck in some bad place or whatever, she has learned that if she just trusts the Lord to deal with me, and she backs away, that the Lord can speak so much more clearly to me than her. And she did, and it was a couple years of really hardcore fishing, and I started getting more and more into it, just learning how to fish during this time. And so now it's been about 5 years of pretty hardcore fishing, and last year, I think 21, going into 22, I was tournament fishing with our little club, and I was fishing 2 other circuits, one one that's 2 hours from here,
Wow.
and one that was, doing a few here and there with a larger thing that comes through. And so, I could be gone every weekend tournament fishing or just practicing or whatever. And so she's been very good to just say, I know the Lord's going to deal with this. And so he did. And this last year we had some more difficulties with the business, and just my body had some issues, just keeping up with the physical requirements of that kind of schedule. And so, this last year, for the most part, after the spring, I pretty much backed away, and I do fish a lot still, but the only tournament that I do is our little 6 or 10 boat, tiny little Paradise Bass Club tournament.
Wow.
And that's it. It's like low pressure, low money.
Because you've learned to kind of dial back as needed,
And I realized
or pay
that-
attention to yourself.
and I just realized that when I start attaching money and obligation to something that I enjoy, it can kind of ruin it, And so it took some of the purity out of the enjoyment, and so realizing that I needed to instead be focusing on my wife, my home, my business. And so the Lord's slowly getting me to care more about my business again, and more about, my marriage, and more about my home that houses us, and the animals and the things I need to take care of around the responsibilities around here. So slowly but surely that hardness is breaking away, and I'm getting back to where I can care for and focus on these things that I should have been doing all along. And so,
We don't live our lives in these isolated moments. They are a culmination of everything, right? And so knowing you, Don, and your history and your childhood, and there's a reason why you walk in your house and see red when you see your dad, because that was you grew up in such a dysfunctional situation, and it's been hard, right? And so this journey where you both are at is the culmination of your whole life, and the process and the journey, and
both of us coming from divorced families.
yes,
That
difficult.
statistic alone is another one where it's like,
Absolutely.
I think more than half of the people where they both come from divorced moms and dads, if both of the couple did come from that situation, their chance of getting divorced, I think, is over 50%.
Is it
also.
really?
I don't remember what the statistic was.
Something high,
Pretty
something
high,
very
yeah.
high, or maybe it's even higher than that. So that's an interesting one to look up too.
Well, and yeah, and so much there, so much work. I mean, I'm thinking back, like, remember you guys getting married, being there at your wedding, and the journey that it's been, and for both of you, that process of just, this has been a rough thing, and these events that can just shatter a relationship, right? It didn't, and would you say that there's more understanding, that you're stronger than you were before?
100%.
Oh, absolutely. We're better communicators. We're more gracious with each other. I think we're in a really good place right now. Not that there isn't room for growth,
Right.
but just it's almost. I'm actually reading a book that a friend recommended, the friend Linnell, who was my brain after the fire, called The Second Half of Marriage, and it's just talking all about this season and how it's not going to look like the first half of marriage. So, trauma or no trauma, we're kind of reinventing things right now. And in some ways it's hard because it's like, what does this look like? But in some ways it's really exciting too. Yeah. So I think we're in a good place right now.
We did take a little bit of the money that we got from all this stuff that's happened, and we went and bought we used to have a travel trailer, and it was hard for her to travel because she's got a neck thing going on where she can't sit in the car for more than a couple hours without hurting pretty bad. So we ended up buying a motorhome to where we could jump in and travel, and she could get up and move around and ice her neck while we're driving. And so that's I think a dream that we kind of share, and a focus that we have is getting out of Dodge for little bits at a time. We recently took a trip for a couple weeks up through Idaho to see all these people that we know and love that have escaped California, including your sister and brother-in-law and some mutual friends that we have. And got to go visit and just go have a routine elsewhere. And so I think that's something that we both envision doing with our slightly 20% retired life that we have right now. And I'm still running this business and have a lot of obligations here in California, but we do want to travel around and go camping get out on these little lakes and hiking trails and biking trails and stuff, and just get away and go enjoy spending time living life together in a new setting and exploring, I think is something we both on our heart. So.
Yep.
Well, and you essentially are able to do that. One of the blessings from the fire was the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
It was like we had a yard sale, and in an hour we sold our house, our underwear, our toothpicks, and every single thing, and got top price for everything.
And we're able to buy this beautiful house that we're in
Yep.
now, and has given some freedom to your life. I mean, less time having to fix up a place, and more time to spend time with each other and refresh and fish and spend time with the fish. And so almost like a new opportunity, a new, I was going to say lease on life, but that feels strange, but a new future, a new direction.
Season.
Yeah.
There's definitely things from our life before there is definitely a dividing line. It's kind of like that when you meet Christ and come to Christ, and then your life is, it's like there's BC and AD, right? You know,
Right.
and so the fire is definitely one of those dividing. You know, we have those in our life. Like our marriage is one of those major things. You know, when my stepfather died, you know, that was a pretty traumatic thing, and it's these, you know, traumatic, good or bad, like intense. And so the fire was that year was one of those, and so I feel like we're just now pulling off of that dividing line. Like this dividing line ended up being not just a finite moment in time, like a day or a week. It's a years wide line that we're just now starting to come off of and become okay, what does our new life even look like? The boys are just now all doing so well and in college, and you know, one of them's paying his own tuition to go to a state, to Chico State actually. He's working part-time, paying his own tuition, taking a heavy load to become an engineer, and he's done so well that he's paying his own way through
That's
that.
awesome.
It's crazy. So we're not needed in that department anymore, and it's hard. And grieving a little bit, and probably grieving a lot for Lisa, but this new direction, this new AD, you know, like this life will look a lot different, and we're just slowly putting our feelers out there and trying different things. And we tried pickleball and figured out that that's not great for her body.
I don't even know what that is.
It's not as nefarious as it sounds. And so we you know, we're just you know, I got a kayak that we put on the back of the camper when we go, and I can go fish and do a little bit of fishing.
You don't take your boat?
I have, well, the kayak would probably rival most people's boats. It's got a
It's not a kayak you would imagine.
it's not, it's a fishing
and a
kayak.
fish
So it
finder.
has
Is it really?
Oh yeah.
fish finder, trolling motor, lights. I mean, you
Well,
can
that-
take a lot
Like
of
we
stuff.
said, he doesn't do anything.
No, it's kind of like saying when we say that Don fishes, he doesn't sit out there on a little paddle boat with a fishing rod and
And the
sit
line, no.
and just kind of peacefully.
It's a full contact sport.
I've got 20-some rods in my boat.
No.
With different
moving
things
from
tied
one
up.
to the other.
Yeah,
exactly.
You probably
Constantly.
don't sit down ever
No.
as you're doing it.
No, he's
You're
exhausted
70, you're
by
70
then.
miles an hour from one spot to the next on this fast, but then you stop and fish.
I do remember the first time I went fishing with him. We went on a little weekend trip, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so fun. We'll go out on the boat. We'll have great conversation. It'll be so
He's
relaxing.
completely deluded, There's no idea.
And I mean, then this like frenetic kind of like fishing is happening. I'm like, I don't really understand. We are not having like relational conversation. If we're having conversation at all, it's about lures and fishing and the
and
bite.
go do that. And
Right.
No, it's a time in my mind to amp things up, not to settle down.
Yeah.
Like, I've got a problem.
No.
They say the tug is the drug.
Tug is the drug.
And that's when that fish tugs on the end of your line. That's what we live for as fishermen.
That's so funny.
Well, thank you both. This has been just incredible. I think better than the first one, for sure.
That's good.
But
Well, we are older and wiser because it has been a few months.
That's true. That's true.
That was our dress rehearsal.
That's right. You guys have so much to offer, not just through this podcast, but your life, your ministry, what you guys have embodied to me just the example of giving and sharing and caring about others. And I know that it's going to continue to resonate in this, this next phase of your life. And so appreciate you both being on. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom?
I love you, Lisa.
Aww. He wanted that on the record.
Yeah. Thanks, babe. I love you too. Thank you, Sandy Joe, for being willing to travel up this way and hear our story. And
appreciate
allow us an opportunity just to, put it out there.
Well, this has been the Nefesh podcast, and here with Dawn and Lisa Spencer. I am so glad to have this opportunity to have them share their story. I know it has resonated with you, and I'm sure has had some deep meaning in your own life. And we will talk to you next time.